Hi, so I wanted to put together some of my thoughts about the new Capcom Big Blue. I've got my arcade 1-ups kind of racked up side by side. I have 3 of the Gen 1 original arcades here, and this one's been converted to run a Raspberry Pi with a 20-inch Dell monitor. These are originals where I had the boards flashed by Very Sneaky, and this is the stock Big Blue with a industrial Lorenzo's IL competition joystick, or what they call the Euro joystick, with HAP style buttons, the classic concave instead of convex. And I've played around with them to kind of prop them up so they're a little bit higher. I felt like the standard height of the Gen 1s on a riser, their stock riser, was too short for me. I'm about 5'11", just a hair under 5'11", and I find them riding a little too low to the ground for my height, and it's going to differ for everyone. But I kind of compare it to the classic arcade machines. I have a bunch of Dynamo machines. I have the HS1, HS2 machines, 19-inch. I have 3 of them. And I've had HS5. I've never had a real Big Blue, but I played a lot on them as we had them when I was at Capcom. And these risers came on in a box with this EVA foam, and this EVA foam was protecting the 4 corners, so they had 4 of these L brackets, kind of keeping the box from getting the wood in the box from getting all blunted and banged up. And it's a nice thick foam that doesn't have a lot of give over time, but it's soft enough so that it sinks down on them and it keeps them pretty stable. And so I kind of propped these up using this foam that was already in the box, and I didn't want to just throw it away. And this is about 1.25 inches, and this brings this height of this control panel of these classic ones to basically 39 inches. And if I measure from the ground to here, it's basically just 38.5. And here I was targeting 39, which it basically hits the center of that joystick at about 39 inches. And the reason why I'm targeting 39 is because that's the height from the ground to the mid plane of the joystick for my Dynamo cabs, and I find that very comfortable for my height. This Big Blue design, or it's reminiscent of the Coam 3. Coam was the cabinet builder, and they built them from Capcom, and they also built the cabinets for the SNK American machines, all those red machines that were familiar playing on in America. They're built by 3 Coam, was the cabinet builder in California. And actually, a little bit of information, I've looked up the old address for 3 Coam, and those warehouses and those facilities are now occupied by Tesla. It's right here in Fremont, California, which is the next city over from me. And for the Big Blue, what I did was I double stacked the foam. So I'm riding in about 2.5 inches of foam, and that brings it to this targeted 39 inches. So I'm basically saying that this cabinet is 2.5 inches too short for my taste. And by propping it up, the difference would be 1.25 inches to compare this one to these style cabinets that they originally came up with. So they basically made the mid plane of the control panel 1.25 inches shorter than these, which is kind of odd, but if you can tell that they're all pretty much the same height now by playing around with these blocks of foam. So it's a great cab. It looks good. It's obviously taller. The thing that I like that I did with some of these old ones is there's a file that you can actually purchase from the designer, and you can 3D print the supports to put a piece of acrylic on top and kind of make a collectible shelf on top. And I have some LED lights running to some of them. So I put a lot of my collectibles there. I'm going to have to put some mounting tape when the action gets a little furious, that you don't want your stuff falling over the place. But the design is, I haven't taken off all the plastic. This is still trying to keep it as new as possible. I'm playing around with it. I'm investigating putting a larger monitor. I'm investigating just converting this to Raspberry Pi and actually taking the board and geometrizing the board so I can put it in one of my other cabinets and play online with people with a different monitor, either a bigger monitor or whatnot. So I'm still figuring that out. And so far I've converted the left side to arcade quality, and this is the original joystick that came in. They are the same that came in a lot of their fighter cabs, so they haven't changed the hardware. The buttons, they do play around with the different micro switches, so depending on supply and demand, I think they've actually been playing around with different button configurations. I've noticed some of them have quick disconnects, some of them are soldered in, some of them have different style micro switches. So they're just going with what inventory they can access, but it's the standard close but not quite the same as the micro switches that we're used to in American arcades, which are not Sanwa. This is, I've gone over it in another video, this is a Sanwa type clone with sort of hap tops on these buttons. They're a little bit like the hap buttons that we're used to. Those buttons were actually built by a manufacturer called Industrial Lorenzo, or IL. I like the cab. The cab is great. It comes with split plane sides so that they can actually get the full height, because they didn't want to have a larger box. So you do have to put these metal brackets to put together the sides. A couple comments that I'll have is that the siding is this kind of printed glossy blue, which basically matches the same style blue, but the original actually had sort of a melamine matte finish to it. So now that it's glossy, I know the difference because I played on a lot of Big Blues and we had them in the office at Capcom, but because I have a Coam built MVS machine, I know that matte finish, and it's not the same, and obviously they can't print the matte color, and a lot of these sides are all kind of printed on a glossy paper and then sealed to the side, so that's why it's not very durable. If you scratch it, you'll just get all messed up. That's why I left a lot of the shrink wrap. I may sell this machine, I may do something else, but I'm playing around with it, with the sticker still, the protective coating is still on the control panel. And emulation feels fine to me. I don't feel like it's skipping frames. I have played online a bit, and I like it. I think that there is the rollback code does get it a little bit disrupted, but mainly it happens when my kids are streaming videos, and then I'm getting a ton of latency. So I don't like the screen size. I wish that it was bigger, so that's why I'm playing around with it. Because I guess I've gotten used to this 20-inch screen, and the machines that I play on are minimum 19 inches. A lot of them are 25. That's why I kind of prefer a bigger machine. And I'm playing around with what I want to do with it here. So the things that I want to go over were really the geometry. A lot of the geometry is very comfortable for me. I just wish it was taller, and that's one thing that I don't think a lot of people have really commented on, the exact height. And it really differs depending on how tall you are. I wish they put like little speaker grills here that would mirror there's like a Q sound sticker in the middle, and then have these speakers. So it was amplified audio in the machines. They had a separate audio circuit, and they called it Q sound based on the stereo output, and it wasn't mono like the original boards were for JAMA. They had stereo output on the boards that were going into the Big Blues, and so they had a full built-in cabinet style stereo audio, and they called it Q sound. So that was kind of the cool thing. I may try to replicate the Q sound sticker and try to get it on here, or 3D print some little speaker grills to kind of make it look a lot more like the Big Blue. And this panel is actually blue with black speakers in it originally, so that's a little bit of a difference. But it's a cool cab. I like the height. I wish that they actually brought up the monitor and kind of condensed some of this. The large marquee, it's not a big deal to me, but it's to complete the style. I get it. I actually have some large marquee that I've collected that were the original Big Blue marquees, and they're huge. They're about this big. It's cool, but I'm fine with the small marquee also. I think it just is there to complete the look, but I wish that the monitor was higher and some of the geometry a little bit different. But it is very reminiscent of the Big Blue. It's kind of cool that way, and I think that they did overall a great job. I would have done a few things differently, but they're coming along. I wish that they would continue to develop their arcade cabinet designs and have a lot better attention to detail. Like the Pac-Man, there's this weird cutout here where the sides look a lot like a Miss Pac, but where they place the marquee on it, and then this open top here, it's a little bit odd. And this is a project that I'm converted to Gen 1 hardware so that I can get more games on. I wanted to go into more detail on how I cut this joystick so that it would fit into the location that they had placed for the hole for the joystick to pop up through. And it's not like you can relocate the joystick because the hole's already cut, and the graphics actually are marked on where they want it to be. They use a Sanwa clone, and it has a very thin base compared to the Industrial Lorenzo joystick that I used. And there's basically 3 joysticks that were very common in arcades. Hap, the distributor, had different names for them because they got them from different suppliers. They called one the Ultimate, they called this one the Competition, they called another one the Super. The Super has a silver or a metallic base to the shaft. It's not plastic coated or ABS like these are, and you can tell the Industrial Lorenzo by the base here is very round. The Ultimate is actually more square, and the metal shaft is thinner than the Competition, what they call the Competition. If you bought an Industrial Lorenzo today, they're called the Euro Stick, and Hap actually cloned these, and when they merged with Suzu, they started cloning these and making their own, and they're not as good. They use an ABS actuator on the bottom, and between the buttons, the type of plastics, it wears differently. As it wears, it feels different from this. They use less nylon, and I feel like when nylon wears, it produces a powder that's very soft, whereas the ABS, the powder that comes off of it as it wears, is very gritty, and so the joysticks just don't feel to rotate as smooth because of the types of plastics and the friction as it rolls around. So that's my feeling. I don't know how accurate that is to other people. I like this joystick the best. I find that mounting in this 1/2 inch wood, it's a pretty good height. Some joysticks, they mount at different depths and are designed for different thicknesses of the control panel. The thing about Sanwa is in Japan, what they use for their control panels are not wood. They use stamped metal sheets and plastics. So their mounting depths are very different from our machines, and so we have a lot different geometry. So to stick them in a wood body cab is actually very odd for me, and so I prefer the height of these what we consider Western, even though this IL joystick's made in like Spain or something like that. So what you need to do is you need to cut a clearance, because what happens is once you mount it in there, it's going to interfere with the mounting of the nut that goes in for new buttons. If you use the original buttons, it'll fit, but what you want is, if you do the joysticks, you want to do the buttons too, because they just feel better. You might find that they're less sticky, quicker action, and for replacement buttons. And so I use IL, or there's a lot of clones of the IL button, and they work just as well because it's not that complicated to make a button, because it's really the magic's in the cherry switch or the micro switch that goes in there. So I replace the buttons first, and then what I do is I go in with my Dremel and I'll cut about 1/4 inch off the side here, and I'll just check every time I clear just enough for that nut. I'll just clear a little bit more, and I'll just see how it fits in there. If you take off the joystick, you can slide up against it and see if you line up with the hole correctly and you have enough to actually screw it in. So once you've actually mounted the buttons on this side, then and you have that nut on the back side of the button that holds the button down, you can actually see how much material you'll have to notch out of this joystick base to clear that nut and have them fit properly. So there'll be like kind of a semicircle cut out here and over here, so to clear these two nuts, and that's all you need to do. And then you can tap new holes to secure the joystick. And because you're going to take off this last mounting hole, you probably need a little small washer to hold the screw, because the screw head might be too small and might come through this larger mounting hole. So that's the only difference on these. And you just basically I take a picture of my phone to make sure, or you do one joystick at a time and you can tell which color goes to which location. So you know, if your reds are up top here on this joystick, you know that they're going to be up on the same micro switch on that. And since the original had the wires soldered in, then you can just desolder them and solder onto another one, or you can desolder them, or you can cut them and then strip them back and put a 1/4 inch quick disconnect. I like soldering things down because I find that they're not going to come back up, and once I get them down, I usually never have to touch them again. Cherry switches are rated to, I think it's 10 million clicks, so we never even come close to that playing at home. It's not like the arcade where they're being run really hard, especially if it's a popular machine. So you need to have these things replaced all the time. And even if I had to replace it, if it had an early failure, for me soldering is not a big deal. Some people have suggested that because it's a replacement part, you should make it easily replaceable, but soldering's easy for me. It may not be for you. Some people prefer crimping, but if you don't crimp all the time, you may not be used to the right amount of pressure that's required to crimp properly. And I've been doing it for a long time, so, and I still get out of practice, so you need to practice on your crimps to get it just right. And so I think it's a less reliable system. I find that a lot of people, the crimps, they also may not slide on properly to the tabs, and they might need to be tightened up. So it's a lot more tuning than just soldering the one wire. So I wanted to address that as well. Thanks.